Hello, welcome to the Gallery newspaper review this morning. I am Titilayo Olamide. And starting with this morning is the Punch newspaper and not the major news headline. I have Nigerians attack federal government. Government fumes as Twitter deletes Buhari's civil war post. Nigerian attack federal government. Government fumes as Twitter deletes Buhari's civil war post. Says Buhari's tweets violate our rules. Media firm, and that is coming from Twitter. It says Buhari's tweets has violated the rule of Twitter. And then post proves president a dictator, says Adebanjo. Post proves president a dictator. And the president's comments suggest violence may incite bloody reactions. And that is coming from SANS, CSOs, and others. That the president's comments on Twitter suggests violence, and that federal government threatens U.S. firm accuses Twitter of polarizing Nigeria, alleges mission suspicious. And you can read the story on page 2 of the Punch newspaper this morning. And then I have a picture story of a gun factory that was nabbed yesterday. Said 81 suspected kidnappers, bandits paraded. 17 AK-47 rifles recovered, and that story is on page 15 of the Punch newspaper this morning. And then Unilag fires lecturers mentioned in sexual harassment story. If you can remember the story of two lecturers that demanded sex for grade, and they have been suspended by the University of Lagos Governing Council. And then that story is on page 6 of the Punch newspaper this morning also. Building collapses, kill 3 Ondo fish sellers hiding from tax force. Building collapses, kill 3 Ondo fish sellers hiding from tax force. And that story is on page 22. And then Osho bank robbers flare as police hunters confront raiders. Casualties unknown. Osho bank robbers flare as police hunters confront raiders, and casualties unknown. And that is also on page 22. You can move to that page to find more on the story. And then foreign elders in Southwest Forest likely to launch attack. Foreign herdsmen in Southwest Forest likely to launch attack, and that is coming from Amotekun. You can read on that story on page 9 of the Punch newspaper this morning. And the 8 field killed as truck rams into motorcycles in Lagos. Okada riders kick. 8 field killed as truck rams into motorcycles in Lagos. Okada riders kick. And you can read that story on page 4 and 5 of the Punch newspaper this morning. Community panics as government kill Fulani leader in Kwara State, Bogud shop. Community panics as government kill Fulani leader in Kwara, Bogud shops. And that story is on page 9 of the Punch newspaper this morning. Bankers dear EFCC says we're not afraid to declare asset. If you can remember last week, we talked about EFCC telling the bank owners and their staffs to all declare their assets, or else they should face the penalty. And now the bankers are also replying and responding to EFCC officials that they are not afraid to declare their assets. And you can read more on that story on page 17 of the Punch newspaper this morning. Oil industry future at risk. Bankido wants Nigeria others. And this story is also on page 17 of the Punch newspaper this morning. Food scarcity looms if open grazing continues, declare Okowa. Food scarcity looms if open grazing continues, declare Okowa. And that story is on page 22 of the Punch newspaper this morning. We're planning for airport concession for 30 years. We are planning for airport concession for 30 years, says federal government. And that story is on page 17 also of the Punch newspaper this morning. APCAN bans street hawkings, moves to cut rates. APCON bans street hawkings, moves to cut rates, and that story is on page 18 of the Punch newspaper. And then lastly, Johnson tackles Rivers chapter over resumption, plans another nationwide strike. Johnson is tackling the Rivers State chapter of the union for resuming, and then they are also processing another nationwide strike. And with that, we come to the end of the Punch. That takes us to Daily Sun this morning. And then on the major news headline, it said federal government films as Twitter pulls down Buhari Civil War tweets. Federal government films as Twitter pulls down Buhari Civil War tweets. President's right to express his anger. That is coming from Lai Mohammed. And then Fayose Mungalu mockery, others knock government. And that story is on page 6 of the Daily Sun newspaper this morning. And then I said agitation for self-determination, not felony. That is coming from Alaafin of Oyo. Agitation for self-determination, not felony. That is coming from Alaafin of Oyo. Group backs presidency on stance against secessionists. And that story is on page 5 of the Daily Sun newspaper. You can read that. Igbo abroad insist on restructuring fiscal federalism. Igbos abroad insist on restructuring fiscal federalism. Condemns government shoots on site order. You can read that story on page 26 of the Daily Sun newspaper this morning. And then on 2021, it said Nigeria, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso witnessed 714 Boko Haram attacks, and that is coming from ECOWAS. That is Nigeria, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso had witnessed 714 Boko Haram attacks so far since the beginning of 2021. Christians have right to defend selves. Christians have right to defend selves against attack, and that is coming from Archbishop Martins. And you can read the story on page 26 of the Daily Sun newspaper this morning. Senate ends discrimination against poly graduates. Senate ends discrimination against poly graduates. Puts varsity degree HND at par. And if you can all remember, some years ago, the Senate have been proposing placing the bachelor's degree and then HM poly degree at the same level, and finally the Senate have finally made this decision. And that you can read that story on page 3 of the Daily Sun newspaper this morning. And then on COVID-19 reports said government approved 5.6 billion naira for 37 oxygen plants. Government approved 5.6 billion naira for 37 oxygen plants, and you can read that on page 7 of the Daily Sun newspaper this morning. Tension as government kill Autumn's aide. Tension as government kill Autumn's aide. Police nab suspects. You can also read the story on page 5 of the Daily Sun newspaper this morning. 14,468 passports ready for collection in Lagos. That says NIS, and that is on page 8 of the Daily Sun newspaper. Lawan Kanu Tinubu hail new NGE officials. Lawan Kanu Tinubu hails new NGE officials. That's on page 8. And finally, abroad graduates get direct admission for PhD in Oxford University. And you can read that also on page 27 of the Daily Sun newspaper this morning. And with that, we move to the Vanguard newspaper. And the major news headline says invasion of Southwest by foreign elders imminent. Invasion of Southwest by foreign elders imminent. That is coming from General Togun, the head of Amotekun, and said Oyo Amotekun chairman General Kunle Togun says they are coming from Futa, Jolon, Mali, Burkina Faso, Chad, Niger Republic. It should be taken seriously, and that is coming from Afenifere. Yoruba should prepare for self-defense, and that is coming from Gani Adams. Nigeria in deep crisis, that is coming from Don. And then we're not oblivious of the planned invasion, YCE. You can read the stories on page 5 of the Vanguard newspaper this morning. And then on IPOB, said Twitter's mission in Nigeria suspect. Twitter's mission in Nigeria suspect, and that is coming from the federal government. It says, we won't be fooled over Buhari's deleted tweet, accuses Twitter of double standards. We won't be fooled over Buhari's deleted tweet, accuses Twitter of double standards. And that story also is on page 7 of the Vanguard newspaper this morning. ICANN Cakes as Nigeria's debt service ratio hits 70%. ICANN Cakes as Nigeria's debt service ratio hits 70%. And that is on page 19 of the Vanguard newspaper this morning. Unilag fires 2 lecturers over sexual harassment. You can also read that on page 10 of the Vanguard newspaper this morning. Yoruba Republic will breed hunger, says Oluwo. Yoruba Republic will breed hunger, says Oluwo, and that is also on page 10 of the Vanguard newspaper. Nigerian leaders have no blood in their hearts. Nigerian leaders have no blood in their hearts, and that is coming from Bishop Kuka. It says that's on page 27 of the Vanguard newspaper this morning. Sajina's ingredients in donation drive as adopters of Islamia students insist on 110 million naira ransom. And you can read that on page 8 of the Vanguard newspaper. Editors worry over growing insecurity in Nigeria. Editors are worried about the over increase of insecurity in Nigeria. And you can read the story on page 8 of the Vanguard newspaper this morning also. And then lastly, on constitution review, it says can demand 70% derivation for oil producing states. Can demand 70% derivation for oil producing states. And that's all for the Vanguard newspaper this morning. And that takes us to Nigerian Tribune newspaper. And the major news headline says, those who govern us have no blood in their hearts. And that is coming from Kuka as APC, PDP trades blame over insecurity. Now that it's on page 5 and 28 of the Nigerian Tribune newspaper this morning. And then local AK-47 rifle discovered in Jos, each sells for 80,000 naira. I have fabricated 180 units in 3 years. And you can read this story on page 24 of the Nigerian Tribune newspaper this morning. Onion producers suspend supply to Southeast. Onion producers suspend supply to Southeast. You can read the story on page 25 of the Nigerian Tribune newspaper. And then I move to page 5. It says federal government attacks Twitter for deleting Buhari's tweets. Federal government attacks Twitter for deleting Buhari's tweets. Autumn security advisor killed. Autumn security advisor killed. And that story is on page 25 of Nigerian Tribune newspaper this morning. And then on Affair on Thursday says appointment, promotion and remuneration of judges in Nigeria, the need for change too. And you can read that on the Nigerian Tribune newspaper also. APC woos Mimiko. APC woos Mimiko, page 29. That is the ex-governor of Ondo State, Olusegun Mimiko, the campaign to APC. Ethnic religious suspicion fueling crisis in Nigeria. Ethnic religious suspicion fueling crisis in Nigeria, and that is coming from Alafin, and that you can read that on page 5 of Nigerian Tribune newspaper. 3 security personnel died as IBB son family members escaped death in auto crash. And can read that on page 25 also of the Nigerian Tribune newspaper. 5 were killed as robbers raid bank in Osun. 5 killed as robbers raid bank in Osun, and that is on page 6. Buhari seeks extension of teachers' retirement age by 5 years. Buhari seeks extension of teachers' retirement age by 5 years. And you can read that on page 30. And then foreign felony herdsmen bandits planning to invade Southwest. That is coming from Amotekun Boss. You can read that on page 29 of the Nigerian Tribune newspaper. Also, Guild of Editors expressed concern over growing insecurity. Guild of Editors expressed concern over growing insecurity, and that is also on page 5 of the Nigerian Tribune newspaper this morning. And then I move to The Nation. And see, this is coming from a report from the police. Said, how we uncovered AK-47 production factory. How we uncovered AK-47 production factory. Governor security advisors killed, traced him to a restaurant. The government security advisor was killed yesterday, and he was traced down to a restaurant before he was being killed. And that story is on page 4 of the Nation newspaper. Government kill policemen, attack Osun Bank stations. OPC men residents resist. Government kill policemen, attack Osun banks and stations. OPC men resist and residents resist. And that is on page 5 of the Nation newspaper. Buhari's tweet spark row between federal government and Twitter. Buhari's tweet spark row between federal government and Twitter, and that story is on page 4 of the Nation newspaper this morning. UNILAG sacks random lecturers. UNILAG sacks random lecturers, and that story is on page 5. 11 Yahoo boys held in Lagos. 11 Yahoo boys held in Lagos, and that story also is on page 3. And then on IPOB report, IPOB men gathering in Edo, says police. IPOB men gathering in Edo, and that story is on page 5 of the Nation newspaper. Foreign elders have camps in Southwest, says Amotekun Boss. Foreign elders have camps in Southwest, and that is coming from the Amotekun Boss. You can read this story on page 27. Tinubu urges journalists to work with responsibility. Tinubu urges journalists to work with responsibility, and that story also is on page 4 of the Nation newspaper this morning. And then lastly, editors ask government to tackle insecurity. Editors ask government to tackle insecurity, and that story also is on page 4 of the Nation newspaper. And then I move to The Guardian. Fireworks anger through Buhari's shock threat to secessionists. Fireworks anger through Buhari's shock threats to secessionists. And then Twitter declared Buhari civil war post for violating rules. Federal government lampoons action, says social media giants applying double standard. Igbo youth petition UN, ICC, USA, UK over genocide comments. And the tender apology to Igbo people, Ohanaeze tells Buhari. Statements not presidential, says Fayose. Ààrẹ Ọ̀nà Kakanfò Northern Youth Group backs Buhari on SOFA's measures against secessionists. That's on page 2 of the Guardian newspaper this morning. And the federal government hopeful of 3 trillion naira from marginal oil feeds deficit. And the Nigerian leaders Atlas, says Kuka, and that story is on page 5. Government raises hazard allowance for health workers, may review doctors' retirement age, and that is on page 3 also of the Nation newspaper. Umahi orders arrest of ex-senator, minister orders over communal clash. That story also is on page 7. You can read that of the Guardian newspaper. APC convention not certain as Buni-led interim committee shows signs of staying put, and that is on page 14 of the Guardian newspaper. And lastly, I have an editorial headline. It said federalism is the answer after all. That's part 32. You can read that on page 18 of the Guardian newspaper this morning. And then I moved to the New Telegraph newspaper. Another major news headline said defection. Mimiko set to join APC after Ayade meets Malami Buni, others in Abuja. Akeredolu's recent outburst not targeted at presidency, says Ojogo. And you can read the story on page 2. And then I have on Islamia School. Said Niger bandits disagree on kidnapped people's number. Niger bandits disagree on kidnapped people's numbers. It says 136 mixing states. The state declares 136 mixing, while the bandits declares 156 being adopted. So you can read more on that on page 3 of the New Telegraph newspaper this morning. As a Buhari's deleted tweet, Twitter's mission in Nigeria suspects. Twitter's mission in Nigeria suspect, and that is coming from federal government. Special operative kill 84 suspects in 1 month. Police. Special operatives kill 84 suspects in 1 month. And that is on page 2 and 6 of the New Telegraph newspaper. DIG freight over gathering of secessionists in Edo, and that is on page 26 of the New Telegraph newspaper. And then Khan said remove Sharia judicial system from constitution. Remove Sharia judicial system from constitution, and that is on page 3. And then Ahmed to FCE, oil price recovery, vaccination spurring growth. You can read that on page 5 of the New Telegraph newspaper. And then lastly, on health hazard, it's a paracetamol used during pregnancy increases autism risk. Paracetamol used during pregnancy increases autism use. So if you need to use any drug while pregnant, you have to seek your doctor's advice to find more about how you can take your drugs that's not to do what is not right. And that is on page 28 of the New Telegraph newspaper. And then lastly, we move to Business Day. On Business Day, it says Nigeria's weak growth trails already low IMF forecast. Nigeria's weak growth trails already low IMF forecast. And 5 reasons the Naira should be appreciating. There are 5 reasons the Naira should be appreciating. If you need to find more why the Naira should be appreciating, you have that story on this Business Day newspaper front page. And then inside the newspaper, Business Day newspaper, it said growing insecurity in Nigeria raises economic concern. Growing insecurity in Nigeria raises economic concern. You can read that on page 2 of Business Day newspaper. And then lastly, Buhari civil war threat tweets violate rules, says Twitter, and that is on page 31 of the Business Day newspaper this morning. And we've come to the end of today's newspaper review. Don't forget to join us by 12 p.m. for yet another update. I am Titilayo Olamide. See you then.